Chocolate? Chocolate! Chocolate!
Hello everybody, Chocolate Guy here, and happy Valentine's Day. 5 years ago, I posted a Hey Arnold Season 2 Best Episodes list on Valentine's Day. Mostly because that's what I was working on at the time, and Valentine's Day seemed like a good deadline to strive to get that done by. But after I realized I liked having a video out on that day, I decided to start releasing a video every year on Valentine's Day. Some years it's just a random video I have in the works that's special in some way, and other times it's actually Valentine's Day themed. This year, when trying to decide what I wanted to make for my Valentine's Day video, I realized because of plans falling through and things getting pushed back that I hadn't done much to celebrate reaching 5 years on YouTube back in August. So, why not celebrate the Day of Love by talking about and ranking episodes I love? In this video, I will pick out the best episodes I've ever talked about over the course of my channel's history these past 5.5 years, and give you my definitive top 5. Any episode I have covered in any of my videos counts for this list. As long as I explicitly mention and discuss my thoughts on it, it can be counted towards this video. Though nearly everything in this video was number 1 on some lists, though that isn't completely universal. For additional ground rules, I only have 3. Firstly, only episodes from seasons of shows I've actually covered count for this video. So I could put one of the best episodes from the first 5 seasons of SpongeBob, since I have covered all of them, but I couldn't put something from season 6 onwards, since I haven't covered those episodes yet, for example. Secondly, I can only pick one episode per show I have covered. I think this list would have turned out pretty similar, if not exactly the same, even if I didn't have this rule, but I didn't want to run the risk of one show taking up all 5 slots. So this will be more of my favorite episodes I've reviewed from multiple shows I've covered compared. And on that note, I will be comparing very different episodes and shows in this video, and want to say all of my opinions and comparisons I make are arbitrary. It's obviously not the most fair to compare these very different things, and I love everything here. That is the main point of this video. I just more wanted to do this one to once again praise episodes I love, but to also do a challenge of trying to pick which of these favorites of mine I actually like the most, and what reasons I can come up with to justify these rankings. You can consider this more of a sampler platter of a bunch of my videos to give you all in one place the episodes I've reviewed on this channel I think you should watch the most from some of my favorite shows, and actually take the specific rankings with a grain of salt. Lastly, since I am covering episodes from multiple shows, there are obviously going to be spoilers from different series, which doesn't matter for some things, but may for others. So if I'm talking about a show you haven't seen and you don't want to be spoiled on anything, just skip that segment. Well, with all that out of the way, let's get into this. Here is my list of the top 5 best episodes I've reviewed. So this was the most surprising choice on the list. Not because Rose's Scabbard isn't amazing. It's still the best episode of Steven Universe Season 1, and is such a powerful and meaningful one, especially for Steven Universe. But I don't know if it's one of the absolute best of the series, and isn't even my favorite Pearl episode. If I had talked about the other season's best episodes before making this list so they qualified, this one wouldn't be anywhere near it. Honestly, if my favorite episode of Steven Universe qualified, it might have taken the number 1 spot. That's just how strong the best episodes of this show are. So it's for those reasons, and because some of the episodes that missed this list were really amazing in their own right, and some were very easily the best of their own series, it made me confident this one would miss this list, if only by inches. But damn, man, Steven Universe, when it is good, is so good. And despite the show having its problems, it really produced some incredible episodes that can go toe-to-toe with nearly anything, at least in my opinion. This episode is just such a compelling look at a person suffering from trauma caused by losing someone who was really important to them through exploring the relationship they have with said person's kid. The loss of someone who you were so close to, and through their actions really defined who you are as a person, like Rose did for Pearl, can not only make that experience of losing them traumatic, but can also make relationships with people you closely associate with them difficult. This specific angle is so hard-hitting and unique to this show, especially with Steven being an outright replacement for Rose, and Pearl essentially having to be a mother figure to him and inspire him the same way Rose inspired her, while not even understanding what Steven really is, and feeling abandoned by Rose because of it, and starting to learn that her own relationship with Rose maybe wasn't what she thought it was, or as healthy as she thought it was either, which makes her dynamic with Steven even more complicated. This episode is such a good setup that really defines Pearl's relationship with Rose and how she perceived it, and then spends the rest of the episode really breaking down why the way she perceived it just wasn't the case, or at least was very different than how she makes it out to be or remembers it, with Rose being a more complex person than Pearl makes her out to be, and despite being an inspiring force, wasn't always honest to her, and did use Pearl for very specific purposes. She was Pearl's leader, or even master, and Pearl was her servant, who Rose got services out of that Pearl fulfilled to a T. It's just so fascinating to watch the episode dissect all of this. And through this, you really get to see the complexities of Pearl's mother dynamic with Steven. How supportive she can be of him, but also how she is just trying to recreate the same relationship she had with Rose, which is messed up for so many reasons. One, that's a lot of pressure to put on Steven, which we see boil over after he fails to understand how Pearl thinks Rose would have acted in a certain situation, and it's once again the recreation of a relationship that wasn't the most healthy in the first place, when Steven and Pearl could have a better relationship all their own. In trying to recreate and have Steven fit this mold is ruining the bond between them, and is an unhealthy way to deal with loss and grief. Having someone serve as a sort of replacement for the people you lose, whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, is something people do to deal with grief and trauma. And the episode demonstrates why it's so destructive. With all that interesting stuff said, the biggest reason this episode made the list is because this is the only episode on it that made me cry, at least on one watch through, with that amazing ending scene. It is just so complex and heartbreaking, not in propping her up, and can have her own just as meaningful, or maybe even more so, relationship with Steven that isn't centered around what she can do for him. Even if she does do a lot for him, being a motherly figure, they can still have a normal mother-son dynamic built on love and respect. And there's nothing wrong with that. While this is inspiring, there is still, at the very end of all this, with them riding away, a sense that Pearl's struggle with these things, while it has lessened through moments like this, isn't over, as the cycle of trauma may continue, with Steven looking like he may have to grow into a Rose-like figure, whether Pearl's necessarily pushing for it or not after this point, and what that will mean for Pearl and their relationship being unknown, setting up future episodes perfectly. This episode is so beautiful and such a hard-hitting masterpiece. If you've never seen Steven Universe, I don't know how much you will get out of it, but if you have seen at least a few episodes and understand the basic dynamic between Steven and Pearl, watch this episode. It hits like a truck, and I highly recommend it. I just think, everything considered, the next four are slightly stronger. So Lisa's Substitute is an episode I absolutely adore, and have since I started this channel, but was the one on the list it had been the longest since I had rewatched, so I was unsure where it would land, and considering the competition, 4 seemed fair. I think this is the best episode of The Simpsons because of how much it gets out of everything it tries to tackle and uses the usual format of most episodes to actually expand on every topic in some way, not just kill time or break the story up. And the episode doesn't sacrifice comedy to do all this, being an insanely funny episode, maybe one of the funniest. The setup with the opening act story is used to perfectly establish who this teacher is and his relationship with Lisa, and then make you think this episode is gonna be a crush on teacher plot, but instead transitions into the actual main story, which is about her mess of a relationship with her father, who really isn't in the episode up until that point, which was a brilliant choice that immediately creates distance between these two that the episode continues to expand on. Through looking at this relationship, the episode also gets so much out of exploring who Lisa is and her struggle with her identity. It shows that she needs someone who understands her as she continues to develop and be part of a world that she doesn't really feel like she belongs in because of her intelligence and ability to understand complex ideas at such a young age. It also demonstrates how a good role model, like a positive relationship with a teacher, can be so amazing for her, but honestly for any kid trying to find themselves and being unsure of the person they want to grow into. And how damaging having someone you want to see as a role model and someone who you feel should be there for you who just isn't, like Homer. Positive representation for kids to shape their world around and having someone you feel comfortable having meaningful and even difficult conversations with is so important for children. And with Mr. Bergstrom being such an amazing, intelligent, and sensitive person, you get to see Lisa have something she's never had before, and the positive impacts it has. And the episode really shows through all of this why Homer does have a hard time connecting with his daughter, but why he needs to make an effort and why their relationship is important. Lisa, before and after Mr. Bergstrom, doesn't have anyone in her life who really understands her, or any strong male role model, getting back into the idea of representation. And when Mr. Bergstrom, during the time he spends in Springfield, does perfectly serve as both, it reveals problems and how much Homer is failing her as a parent for the reasons I've already said, and how great it would be for Lisa's happiness and development if he would step up and be there for her, especially when Mr. Bergstrom does leave and she is left in shambles, missing the man who meant so much to her, but at the same time, not knowing how she is gonna go on, not having someone in her life who is like that. The conclusion is so fantastic and wraps all this up really nicely, showing 2 different messages that both work really well off of each other. The first being always knowing and being proud of who you are no matter what. Even though all those things I mentioned are important for children to have, you are still your own amazing person, and as long as you know and are happy and confident with who you are, you will go on to do amazing things and live a happy life. But at the same time, it is also good to strive to have better relationships with the people around you and getting them to understand where you are currently, because once again, there are important things for children to have as they grow and develop. And beyond that, Lisa shouldn't feel emotionally neglected by her father or feel like her father is setting a bad example for her. For that reason, this dynamic between Homer and Lisa is still a very important one, and if Homer steps up, as he proves he can do in the great final scene, it can be the most meaningful relationship the two of them have as well. Both of the last 2 scenes are just some of the best in animation history for how meaningful and hard-hitting they are. The fact that this episode has both of these scenes back to back, which one on their own would make an episode the series' best, proves why this is easily the best Simpsons episode. The Bart stuff breaks up the main story well, but beyond that, as I kind of hinted at earlier, really does serve to push Homer even further away from Lisa, making him feel even more distant and make him feel like he's taking the easy road out, helping Bart with a simpler problem he can understand while neglecting his daughter's more complex problems, making it seem like he doesn't care. And then as you break down the layers of Homer's character, really making it seem like he is just too out of it and too stupid to even try or put in the time. It's effective, and that plot has so many hilarious and iconic moments, rounding out this episode to make it the full package perfectly. I even like the smaller things this episode tackles, like how The Simpsons being middle class really colors different aspects of such a complex story at pretty much every level. I specifically love the middle class line Mr. Bergstrom says to Lisa, which just hits so different, man. As someone who grew up in a middle class household, like, I get it, as much as I don't want to, and that is the way it should be, but man, it can still be rough, especially when you're growing up and you just don't understand every aspect of how the world works. Also, there's another amazing smaller message in here through seeing that Homer is happier when he tries to be a good father and is really good at it, showing how rewarding good parenting is despite it being difficult, and that you and your kids' lives will be better for it. As I said, this is the most meaningful relationship the two of them will probably ever have because of just how important it is. And it shows all of this in a really beautiful way, as seen in his final monologue to her, where you really see how much he cares and how important it is for him to put a real effort into this thing. If you can only watch one episode of The Simpsons, watch this one. It is so damn meaningful, having layers upon layers to peel back and dissect, while being hilarious to boot. This episode isn't higher because despite how amazingly well-rounded this episode is, I wish they went further with showcasing Lisa and Homer's relationship, specifically why Homer does care for Lisa. This is such an interesting aspect that does end up being a smaller, if not still very effective part of the episode, because they mostly save it for that ending scene, which is effective, but with how much this one tackles about all its other topics it covers, I wish we would have gotten to see a little more of that. But yeah, the next three just go further with everything they try to achieve, in my opinion, which is pretty insane, because this episode goes insanely far with most things. So yeah, let's see what episodes beat this one out. I really thought Helga on the Couch could be number one, and did debate it for at least a little bit. In the end, I just had more of a personal attachment to the next two episodes in different ways, but I cannot state this enough. This is still one of the best character study episodes ever made. It is paced perfectly to perfectly examine Helga, who is the show's best character and one of the most fascinating and complex characters in any show. Every scene and choice made to tell Helga's life story and dive into why she is the way she is so artistic and meaningful. They just get so much out of every little detail. And they go so far representing every aspect of her life to give you the full picture of this complex character in only 20 minutes, which is such an impressive feat. Every aspect reveals and explores her character in such a thorough way while developing her further for the future in a way I've seen very few pieces of media do, while tackling themes of abandonment, neglect, abuse, and, in particular, how poor self-esteem created by a sense of inequality within a household can create a person like Helga, and her attachment to Arnold, and her aggressive, angry, and outright violent personality. scratching the surface of how to make these things better, but setting her on the right path, while also showcasing that while Helga was born out of unhealthy circumstances, not everything about her is unhealthy. And while her crush on Arnold feels like the biggest aspect of her life and the one she needs to keep the most secret, it's always been a thing distracting her from bigger problems. So getting over that and being at peace with that aspect of her life will allow Bliss to help her deal with bigger things in the future. Bliss also helps expand on Helga's worldview of that as well, that she can tell Arnold how she feels if she does want a relationship with him, and that the world won't end if she acknowledges her crush to other people, but there's nothing wrong with keeping it a secret until she's ready to make a move, which does make her happier and more confident. This episode just shows Helga is so much more than her crush on Arnold, and gives us the most compelling reason I've ever seen to care about and get invested in a character, and demonstrates that people are so much more than one may think based on their most notable attribute, even children who you may expect to be more simple. I think that's a really powerful and complex lesson for kids to learn, especially, but even adults who may work with children or have kids of their own can take a lot away from that. There's just so much that goes into a person. This message is especially effective when you go this far proving it, and I've never seen an episode do that quite like this one. Also, the episode just has so much to say about therapy and the stigma around it, and how some of it may be at least partially justified. Dr. Bliss definitely gets really into picking Helga's life apart, finding what may be wrong with her in a way, even if she wouldn't view what she is doing in those terms, and I wouldn't either. At the same time, she does genuinely care for her patients, and helps Helga a lot to talk about and realize things she never would have before, honestly changing her life for the better. The episode shows, because of how helpful a good therapist like Bliss can be, and breaks down bullshit myths about therapy and how it operates, the episode is just so meaningful. And it's also really meaningful for how it looks at Helga's character, and is so important for anyone to watch because of what it has to say about dealing with mental health issues in a healthy way, and showing that therapy can be such a positive thing even though stereotypes still continue to exist. No matter who you are, whether you've seen any Hey Arnold episode or not, you should check out this episode immediately. You will be so compelled by what the episode has to offer, and really appreciate how tragic but fascinating of a character Helga is, and the story this episode tells through exploring that. Especially if you think therapy is bullshit, give this episode a watch, because it just might change your mind. There's just so much to appreciate and even learn with this episode. With all that said, there are still 2 episodes I like more. This was probably the most surprising placement on the list. Not choice, but definitely placement. Because I'd be lying if I said I didn't believe Reaching Out would make it on. No, it's definitely one of the best episodes I've reviewed on this channel. It was always a lock. But this high, above an episode like Helga on the Couch? Why? Well, there's one big reason, but let me quickly recap why this is the best Owl House episode. This episode has 3 stories that all deal with varying degrees of people struggling with anxiety, and showing how that can affect you and impact your life, and, in Luz's case, how that relates to trauma. I think all 3 stories are interesting, and the contrast between the heavier and much lighter ones balance this episode out perfectly, making it such an enjoyable and engaging watch, but still a very thematic one where each story fits together in some way, and they don't shy away from some really heavy topics. You can take something meaningful away from each. Edric's story is a fun look at a person struggling with their identity, and through getting this fun, crazy experience with Ida and King, realizes he shouldn't be anxious about making changes to his life when he isn't happy. It's a great lesson and fun story with some good gags, and once again, this specifically balances out the other heavier, more complex stories while still being thematic to the episode. Amity's story sees her struggling with the anxiety of not feeling like she is close to either of her parents, but especially her dad, who she looks up to and thinks is a good person, but doesn't feel like she can talk to about much because he just wants to push her to be a powerful witch who joins the coven, even though she is growing and evolving away from that idea that's been instilled in her since she was young, which creates a rift between them. And you see Amity try to close that rift through winning this contest her father has won, but for how much of this episode demonstrates Luce running from her own problems, Amity is kinda doing the same thing by confronting her issue indirectly because she is too scared to speak about these things openly to her father, trying to prove in some other way she is strong and can make her own choices and doesn't need to join a coven without actually talking to her dad and trying to make him listen. And the episode shows that when she does talk to her dad, she is happier and has a better relationship with him for it. This story shows that anxiety can cloud your judgment of how to deal with problems, and you shouldn't let anxiety make you afraid to take the actions you need to take to be a happier person, in a really effective way all its own. But come on. While these stories are great and effective pieces attached to Luz's struggle, her struggle is why this episode is where it is. Luz's story is just such an effective look at how trauma can cause anxiety and how anxiety can cause trauma and how it is a continuous cycle that can destroy a person. But also shows kids there is a way out. And this experience is one that really connects with me personally a lot, which is why it's so high. Not to get too personal, while I haven't dealt with trauma of losing a loved one, at least the way Luce does in this episode, I have dealt with pretty crippling anxiety at multiple points in my life. At least one of those times brought on by trauma of watching a relative suffer and pass. But what I really relate to in this episode is two ways it portrays anxiety. Firstly, I like how this episode shows how isolating anxiety can be and how it can suck the joy out of literally everything, making your life about running from your anxiety. Everything you do has to serve as a distraction from your anxiety. You can't just sit and enjoy a moment or fully engage with what you're doing, and it inevitably leads to you pushing people away because just hanging around and engaging with another person is too hard because you're constantly stuck in your own head and need something to completely distract you. It's especially hard to help other people deal with their issues when you're so consumed by your own, even though you do deeply care about your friends and family. Throughout all of Luz's story, you see how her anxiety just ruins any fun she could have at this competition and serves to push Amity away because everything she does is just to make herself distracted and feel better, not actually really caring about Amity's problems or mission. Even though she obviously does and cares about Amity deeply, but distracting herself takes top priority, leading her to do dumb things, which has that result and gives off that impression. I think this kind of experience is one many people have dealt with, including myself, and I've never seen a representation be so pinpoint accurate that it almost hurts to watch. This episode just really nails that feeling and experience. The other thing this episode represents that I relate to is the idea of how hard it is to deal with anxiety, or how it can be brought out when you lose safety nets you have had your whole life that make you feel comfortable. Luce being away from home during the anniversary of her father's death, at the time when her and her mom mourn the loss of her father through their tradition of picking flowers, is what brings all this on, because she struggles with that loss, and without being able to be home with her mom, she feels awful and guilty about not being there and doesn't know how to mourn without her mom or that experience they take part in. It demonstrates how people grow accustomed to safety nets, and the removal of them can create demons. Luce always has struggled with the death of her father, as any kid would, but through things like this tradition with her mom, was able to cope and feel better. Remove that and she is just so lost. But this episode brilliantly and inspiringly so shows she doesn't have to be. She can find other ways to mourn, like picking flowers with Amity. But it can be hard to come to conclusions like that when you feel so isolated and are just so removed from what you have really grown to feel comfortable with, and the things that kept these feelings at bay. When I went to college far away from where I grew up, I dealt with horrible anxiety for a lot of reasons, but was partially brought on and definitely worsened by the lack of safety nets I had grown accustomed to. I never felt at home or like I had a space to escape my horrible thoughts and misery, and felt so isolated, struggling to make relationships because I just didn't feel like it was something I could handle, and I just didn't feel comfortable reaching out to people I was less familiar with about problems like this. But it was through reaching out and additionally creating my own sense of home or a safety net where I went to school that I was able to finally enjoy my life again and be a much happier person. And I really do think that's what this episode beautifully reaffirms, that reaching out is not only so important and can change your life for the better, but specifically establishing your own safety nets with your environment and the people around you in a place you may feel like you can't be happy in because of your own demons and just being less familiar with it in general is not only really helpful, but incredibly possible. And once again, like I said in my original review, reaching out may be hard, especially when it's people you still feel like you're still getting to know, but it is so helpful and can really change your life. And the final scene, where Luce does open up to Amity, and Amity supports her and helps her find a way to make this world feel safer so she can deal with feelings of anxiety and grief. It's just one of the most powerful and meaningful scenes I've ever seen in television, beautifully demonstrating all of this. Add on to this the fact that this episode also had two other really good thematic stories about anxiety that tie into this one perfectly and has a ton to say on their own merits, is the reason why this episode is so high on this list and why I just love it so much. If you haven't seen any Owl House, I think this episode will work fine on its own, but come on. The Owl House is so good, and it's not that long. And if you need just one reason to watch the show, even though there's a billion of them, do it so you can fully experience this masterpiece and get the most out of it. With all that said, I still like one other episode I've covered on this channel slightly more. So before we get into number 1, I just want to quickly explain why a couple episodes missed this list. You could consider this the honorable mention segment of the video, but it will be much shorter than most because I've talked about all these before. And I want to use this time to more give a brief explanation about why a couple episodes that were in the running to make the top 5 didn't. I really thought And She Was Gone would make the list because it's so unique with what it has to say about mental health and mental health diagnosis. And I like it quite a bit more than some of Hey Arnold's best episodes. It's the only episode of the show I think can go toe-to-toe with that show's best. And I was kind of hoping we would have a crazy upset and it would land higher than Helga on the Couch. I really did debate putting it on the list. But rewatching it one more time for this list, it just slightly missed it. And the reason, honestly, is I think the Carl plot is great and wouldn't have any critiques if I wasn't comparing it to the other best episodes I've reviewed. Since I have to, I feel like that story could have gone a little further, exploring Carl's change and his headspace throughout. It's such a minor issue, but when comparing greats, that one detail did barely knock it out of this list proper, as I do prefer Rose's Scabbard overall. This would be number 6 though, easily. You don't need to have seen any Ginger to watch this one. Go check it out right now if you're able to, even though Paramount is making it really, really hard to watch it at this point. You will be pretty stunned by how great and unique it is if you're able to. I really debated putting the Krusty Krab training video on this list too, because it is my favorite episode of my definitive childhood show, and one of the funniest pieces of media I've ever seen. And creating an episode that is so funny from start to finish, and gets the most jokes out of every aspect of its concept, is one of the most difficult writing jobs ever. And being the best episode of a show that has quite a few episodes like that, it's honestly more impressive that it is a masterpiece and the best episode of the show compared to any other episode on this list, despite the complexity of all of them. So between sheer love and respect, along with the fact that this was the only sheer comedy episode that really qualified, that doesn't try to do anything else, I felt like I had to put it on there somewhere since it would only be fair. But I don't know. I just got more out of the episodes I put on this list. And maybe that is because they are all such rich, complex stories that tackle themes and ideas I really engage with more than this hysterical masterpiece. And yeah, maybe that's not fair, but it is what it is. This is why I said at the beginning, though, that these rankings aren't that important. I love this episode, it's one of my favorites of all time, and if you somehow haven't seen it, go watch it right now. You will die of laughter. And it's probably the easiest episode to watch on this list, and will continue to be till the end of time, so go check it out. I don't really think The Fright Before Christmas, in the end of the day, stood much of a chance to make the list proper, but I want to give it a mention because it was relatively close, all things considered. Despite being the only episode in this video that didn't top its original list it comes from, that being the Best Classic Nicktoons Christmas Special list, where it came in second to Arnold's Christmas in a squeaker. But the fact that it even competed, and seriously did, with such a juggernaut, and I think it's nearly as good as some of the episodes on this list, meant out of respect, I had to shout it out. It's just such a unique and fun Christmas story that uses its format to its fullest advantage, and there are just very few episodes that engage me and I enjoy watching as much as this, as I continue to rewatch it every year with it becoming a Christmas staple for me. Please, if you haven't seen it, check this one out. You don't need to have seen any Danny Phantom for this one to become one of your Christmas staples as well. The reason it didn't make the list is because, while it deals with interesting themes and has such an interesting story, it just can't really compete with the super complex stuff I put on the list proper. But the fact that it even comes close, props to this episode, man, and I hope to talk about it again someday. Arnold's Valentine doesn't count, as I do think Helga on the Couch is the better episode at the end of the day, and that was an opinion it took a long time for me to come to. But this was my favorite for years, and whenever I imagined doing a list like this, I always expected to see Arnold's Valentine competing with the best of them. So it's really weird to make this list on Valentine's Day and not include it. So I had to mention it in some way, and I just want to say this is still one of my favorite television episodes. And if you want the best Valentine's Day episode recommendation, this one will always be the best. Please check it out today if you haven't, as it's such an interesting look at an amazing character dynamic and how kids view the idea of love and romance and how that affects their lives through exploring said dynamic in a really funny but genuinely engaging way that just has a lot to say. Cannot recommend it enough. I watch it on Valentine's Day every year for a reason. With all that said, let's finish this list and get into what I consider to be the best episode I've reviewed on this channel. So if you've seen every video on my channel, then this pick of The Crossroads of Destiny being number 1 probably isn't super surprising. If you've only seen some of my most popular stuff, or only follow me to hear me talk about 1 or 2 particular shows, you are probably scratching your head right now. Avatar: The Last Airbender is my favorite show of all time, and early on in this channel's existence, I made 2 best episodes lists about the first and second seasons that only a small handful have seen, and honestly, that's not the end of the world because those videos aren't great. Well, not terrible, and I still agree with most of what I said in them. For a show as interesting and complex as Avatar, a lot of my thoughts and analysis in those videos are oversimplified and underwritten. It's for this reason I actually don't have a lot to say on this episode right now, because I do plan on remaking those videos along with finally releasing the Season 3 list, or I'll release one big Avatar best episodes list as a whole package. Either way, I am going to talk about this one with the actual true depth it deserves sometime in the future. What I will say for now, to at least explain why I think this is the best episode I've reviewed on this channel, is because this is just the culmination of my favorite season of my favorite show, and getting to see 2 of the most interesting characters in television history after one hell of a season of build-up, making the toughest decisions that could mean basically the destruction of the world at large, and their own personal world they have created for themselves throughout the series, depending on what they pick, and the episode really plays around with what that means for both characters in such a fascinating way, while a nation crumbles around them. It is just the most interesting piece of television I've ever seen, and one I get the most out of every time I watch it. This was also the first episode of television I ever watched as a kid that really felt larger than life. And while, in that sense, I have seen crazier and bigger things, the scale of how huge the story feels and how important every very personal decision that is made feels to the fate of everything that has been built up all show is still just too compelling to ignore. I'm left heartbroken by the events of this episode every time, even when I haven't seen the show in a while, because this episode just gets me so damn captivated by how compelling it is. I'm just blown away by the results of the story, with how engaged I am, and how meaningful and impressive this episode truly is. But the reason this is number 1 is because Aang and Zuko are some of the best characters in television, and watching them grapple with decisions that will mean a world-changing level of difference after just the best season of build-up, where you have grown so attached to them, knowing that everything will be different depending on what they choose, and really dissecting their headspace of how all this affects them, so when they make their decisions and we see the fallout from it, it's just the most devastating thing ever. All of that culminates to be some of the most compelling and amazing television you will ever see. Just the perfect episode and perfect season finale. If you haven't seen this one, or much of Avatar, I don't know how much you would get out of it, because it is the finale to the second season, but come on. It's Avatar: The Last Airbender. At the very least, it's one of the best shows ever made. If you haven't seen it, then you gotta go check it out right now, because there are so many episodes nearly as good in this one, just in the second season alone. You are missing out if you have not seen this. You gotta do it. This will always be one of my favorite episodes ever, and just the one that qualified for this list I get the most out of watching. Even if an episode like Reaching Out connects with me personally more, this was always gonna land at number 1 on this list. And with all that said, thank you so much for watching. Since I talk about many shows in this video, and there's no real algorithm-friendly title, I'm not sure how many people this will reach, or how many people will watch it. But I thought this was a really fun idea for a video today, and I'm really glad with how it turned out. And if you did check out the video, I cannot thank you enough. Any support for my content just means a lot. Even if you never watch another video from me, I appreciate it. If you did enjoy this video though, please leave a like and subscribe for more content similar to this in the future. Leave me a comment down below if there are any episodes on here you are really fond of, or an episode you think should have been higher, or if this video made you want to check out any of the episodes I mentioned. They're all great, and I highly stand by all my recommendations of them. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And with all that said, updates on new videos will be coming out soon. I'm gonna go eat some chocolate and watch Arnold's Valentine. So, until next time, this has been Chocolate Guy, signing off.